Thank you. We're today here with Howard Dean, and thank you very much for being able to participate in this brief interview. It's really interesting to be able to talk with you because here in Italy, we started off in 2005 using meetup.com for something that was still not a political movement at the time, but it was more something like civic involvement around the blog, and we got people doing things and trying to exercise their civic participation within their towns. But we started off with Meetup because the year beforehand, you actually started it, you started using it in US for your campaign, presidential campaign. So I was very, very interested in understanding how you started off using Meetup and how you actually thought of your really particular campaign that brought you from Vermont to a presidential candidate. And I think that's the first time it actually happened in history, if I'm correct.
So it was quite interesting. Ours was a true grassroots movement. It formed out of the fact that the Democrats were becoming more like Republicans every day because they were afraid to lose, so they would vote for Bush's tax cuts, Bush's war. And I opposed the war, not because I was particularly left, but because I knew we were being lied to. And I think, you know, having lived through the Vietnam War, I remember being lied to by presidents of both parties. And I think that if you're going to ask somebody's parents to send their children to die, potentially, you better not be lying. And if you are lying, it doesn't matter what the cause is, you shouldn't be doing it. So we had no money. I come from a tiny state, but we had enormous support from young people. They organized the campaign because we had no money. So we had huge numbers of 22-year-olds who can't come to work for us, sleeping on floors and all this kind of thing for practically no money. And they put the whole thing together. They understood how I knew nothing about computers. I still barely know anything about computers, but they organized everything. They created this campaign for them. Meetup was something I knew nothing about. And my campaign manager, I had 3 employees at the time, said, "Oh, you're number 6 on Meetup." And I said, "Meetup? What is Meetup?" And she said, "Well, it's this place that you go if you like gardening or something, and then you meet on the internet, and then you can go to a bar and you can talk once a month with all the people that you talk to on the internet." So about 2 weeks later, we're walking down the street and she says, "Oh, you're number 2 on Meetup." And I said, "Oh yeah, who's number 1?" And she says, "Witches." But it was totally organic. Indivisible, which is actually a very large, serious internet organization or activist organization now, was created using the Meetup model. They have 5,000 groups around the country. We had 800, and that was enormous. It was very, very powerful, but it was totally run by the grassroots from the bottom up. I would give them messages after they created themselves, but the young people invented that for themselves as their own vehicle. And we eventually had to pay Meetup. We eventually had to pay Meetup royalties. Otherwise, their participation would have been a campaign contribution.
So how did it actually come up? You started saying, "Okay, let's use this system," and how actually did you start participating? Did you participate in meetups? How was the first one? How did the first one start off?
I think it was just a group of people who they were getting no support from anyone in the Democratic Party. And I was a Democrat, but I was very much against what the leadership of the party was doing. And they were completely out of touch with young people who were disgusted with politics of all parties. Does this sound familiar to you? And so they really began it. But once we realized we had this network, then I did begin to go to meetups. And the first one I went to was in New York in the East Village. And I remember, being bundled into a car and driven down to this at night. And I get out of the car and there was a line out the door, around the block again. And I thought, oh, there must be a big concert here. It was the Meetup. And there were 500 people inside, and the fire marshal said no more. And there were another 600 people outside lining up. And I realized, I was just stunned. I was absolutely stunned.
So
it was really self-organization. I'd love to tell you how we did it. It was the power of the message, and the power of the message was being against the war, of course. But the real power of the message is you have the power to change your lives. And if you don't use it, somebody's going to change it for you. Individuals have power in their own lives. And the trouble of this country today is all the people who believe in Trump, they believe in Trump because they have no belief in themselves.
So how did you create the program for your campaign? Did you use these groups of meetups or other self-organized groups?
Yeah, we did. They self-organized. They created their own events. We gave them wide latitude. In Iowa, we had a group of people who put on Dean for President t-shirts and then went out and cleaned up messes in the water system or a dump somewhere, or they did an environmental project, but they all had Dean for President on their t-shirts. So they self-organized. And then of course we were able to organize them because they didn't know how to do grassroots, how to knock on doors and all that kind of stuff. We did teach them how to do that, but they self-organized. What can we do to support Howard Dean for President? And then they went out and did it.
Your campaign is probably in history books of political campaigns the first one that actually used the internet to organize people physically, like Meetup, but also get them around a project digitally. So I remember also your ability to get funds from online. Can you recall how you actually did this and how you managed?
Well, this was all young people who understood the new world of the internet. And they understood how to raise money online too. I mean, there were always, I don't remember if GoFundMe was already going by that time, but they understood how to do this. And, you know, we learned from them, not the other way around. What they learned from us is that if you don't do politics, you're not going to get anywhere because you can't change anything. And nobody likes politics, but you have to do it. What we learned from them was how to do it in the new era. And then actually most of those kids and also the staff went on to work for Obama, which is how Obama won, really. In the most extraordinary way. We were very poorly organized. He was very well organized, and that made the big difference. I'll tell you a great story about my fundraising. So when you run for president, you're never home. You come home once, maybe half a day every 2 weeks, you know, kiss your children and your wife. And then you got to go to the headquarters and say thank you to all these people who are sleeping on floors for no money working for you. So I went to the headquarters. It was lunchtime. I think it was in the fall of 2003. Maybe it was the summer of 2004. Mm-hmm. And I go to the headquarters to thank everybody. And there are all these kids, you know, 20-something years old running around. And some kid comes up to me and says, "Governor, I want you to sit in front of this computer here and have a ham sandwich for lunch." And I said, "What are you talking about? What, are you mad?" But I did it because I was used to doing what they told me to do, right? I trusted them. And in those days, there was hardly any such thing as live streaming, and there weren't Macs with these lovely cameras in them. So they had one of those lenses on top of the camera that was plugged into the computer, and they live streamed me eating a ham sandwich for lunch. The reason for that was that Vice President Cheney was giving a $25,000 a couple luncheon in South Carolina simultaneously. He raised $525,000. We raised $625,000 online having a ham sandwich for lunch in small contributions of less than $100 and many times less than $20. We had a campaign that said, give up one of your pizzas this month and send the $5 to the Howard Dean campaign.
That's something we worked on a lot also here in Italy. The Five Star Movement started on San Francisco Day on the 4th of October because of this spirit of we can eat a ham sandwich and not necessarily need a fast to go for lunch. So I understand how that actually works a lot. So On the program side, you were saying that the groups actually managed to create topics and create parts of the program. How did this actually self-organized for you?
How did it work for us? They look,
Yeah.
people in their own districts know best how to do their own politics. So that was the core belief. What we knew was, though, how you talk to 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds and 70-year-olds. So there was a lot we could teach them, but we couldn't teach them anything until they knew that we trusted them. So once they began this organization and the campaign was clearly built around 20-year-olds, then they were willing to go out and do some of the work that you have to do when you're talking to older people. Because as you know, young people are disinclined to trust anybody that's more than 10 years older than they are.
Yeah, how did you actually get the spirit of getting people volunteering for your campaign? Because this spirit of to be a volunteer for civic participation is something that builds up many of the successful campaigns, and yours was certainly one of these.
It was, we trusted each other. I listened to them. I paid attention to what they told me. It was just like the story of the guy who said, sit here and have a ham sandwich. If you'd said that to most candidates, they would have said, can you get this guy out of my office? But I didn't do that. And they knew that. And that came across. It was a connection between me and the people who were 35, 40 years younger than I.
So simplicity and trust.
It was honesty is what it was. I mean, I eventually lost the race because I was too blunt. The scream speech had nothing to do with it. The so-called I have a scream speech. That was after the fact. I was leading and I came in third in the first primary, and you can't do that. But because I was so blunt, the young people loved me because I would say things that politicians wouldn't say, and they knew they were true.
So did you actually apply any of these participation techniques or ways of getting people involved when you were governor of Vermont?
No, I was a much more conventional politician when I was governor of Vermont. I did a few unconventional things. I stood for hours on street corners with a huge sign waving because the first statewide office I ran for was one that nobody really knows much about. It was a lieutenant governor. But it was pretty, you go to the county fairs, you say hi to as many people as you can. It was mostly about name recognition. Then when I was governor, I was always running as an incumbent because I was lieutenant governor. The governor dropped dead of a heart attack, and all of a sudden I was governor. So I never had to run the kind of grassroots campaign in order to win. I just had to be well organized. But I was an underdog when I ran for president. Nobody thought I had any chance at all. They laughed until I suddenly outraised the front runner in 1 month.
First they ignore you, and then they laugh at you, and then
and then they run away in terror.
And then they fight. You have a great story on your campaign, and we've been writing about it all over the place. When we talk about how we managed to do what we've done with meetups, especially, we always recount how the year before we were looking at your campaign and how you actually managed to do it magnificently.
Well, I'm not done yet. Right now, I'm building an enormous national database for Biden, even though I have no formal position, because that's the one thing we didn't get to do after I ran the Democratic Party for 4 years. That was a fun part too, because nobody in Washington wanted me to be the chairman of the party. I went outside to the grassroots to get all those votes too, and they were furious. But in the end, I made them do things they didn't want to do, and it made them stronger. And then Obama, Obama was great. He was very generous to me in terms of his credit and so forth. But, it's very hard to change the establishment from inside the establishment. So what I say to you is congratulations, first of all. And I say to your followers, keep giving them a hard time and make them toe the line.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It was
David, thank you.
Special.
Thank you very much.